Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Psychedelic Vantage. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Vili Valcheva, CEO of GH Research. GH Research has had an eventful first quarter of 2025, announcing promising proof of concept data for GH001 in two different indications, unveiling impressive phase 2b data in treatment-resistant depression, and raising $150 million in a follow-on offering. The company's lead product candidate, GH001, is formulated for 5-MeO-DMT administration via proprietary inhalation approach and is designed to achieve ultra-rapid and durable remissions from depression. GH Research believes that GH001 has potential to change the way TRD is treated today. And when you look at their phase 2b data, it's clear why they see this type of potential. In today's conversation, among other topics, we'll learn more about GH Research's thought process behind the GH001 individualized dosing regimen, some details of the company's phase 2b results, and the path forward for GH001. Dr. Valcheva, thank you so much for coming on the channel today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Jake, and a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well. So, before we dive in, can you share a bit about your background, your journey to becoming the CEO of GH Research and the mission of GH Research?
Very good. Yeah. So I am a physician by background, and everyone knows me as Vili or Dr. Vili. So feel free to call me Vili. After working in medicine, I moved to pharma. Primarily, the reason was because I got disappointed and I struggled with especially pediatric oncohematology, where there would have been at that time very little treatment options, and you would have to lose young patients and talk to their families. So at that time, I moved to pharma. My background in pharma is I've worked in big pharma such as Sanofi and Ipsen. I've spent 15 years in Sanofi, and prior to moving to GH Research, I worked in another biotech, which I don't know if you've heard. It was called Albireo. It's a rare disease company where we developed an orphan drug for a pediatric liver disease, and it was a pretty amazing experience, Jake, because we changed the treatment paradigm of a disease where these babies would need liver transplant or not survive the end-stage liver disease. And then we discovered treatment. And Albireo got acquired by Big Pharma. That's what usually happens with successful biotechs. And after that acquisition, I actually thought I've been part of an amazing experience which would never happen again. And there I am in another biotech where I've joined, and I really thought it's an exceptional opportunity to work on such an innovative approach and have an impact on another disease that is so difficult to treat, such as depression. So I joined GH Research initially as Vice President Clinical Research and Medical Affairs. Quickly after, got promoted to Chief Medical Officer, and a few months ago, I became the CEO of the company. The reason for that is that I have a very diverse background with experience in research, medical affairs, market access, commercial launches globally. I've worked in Paris, in Boston, traveled a lot to New York, London. So it was good time for me to transition before the phase 2b data.
I see. And what would you say is, I guess, yeah, the mission of GH Research? What is the ultimate mission with the company?
Well, the mission is to really develop GH001 as a practice-changing treatment, and staying out of the cliches, practice-changing or revolutionizing or any of that. There's a huge unmet need for an ultra-rapid antidepressant, and we have a unique concept. So the mission is not just to develop practice-changing treatment, but actually to help patients be free of their depressive symptoms very quickly, and then with infrequent retreatments, keep them in remission. And our goal is to, get it through development and one day have it in the interventional psychiatry clinic. Finger
Yeah,
crossed.
there's definitely a need for new treatments, especially for
Mm,
those who are failed by the current standard of care, especially
mm.
people with treatment-resistant depression. So can you share, maybe a high-level overview of the phase 2b data and, the extremely impressive response and remission rates seen at the 6-month time point for those who have completed the open label extension so far?
Yeah, sure. So I just cover top line, and we have presented the data. So for colleagues, physicians, and those that are interested, they can always refer to the data set and our website. So we have run and completed the double-blind phase of our double-blind placebo-controlled randomized phase 2b trial. What is interesting is that first we have a double-blind phase, which has a primary endpoint very early at day 8, but we do measure the MADRS, which is, the scale that we use for depressive symptoms. We measure it as soon as 2 hours after administration and also on day 2. And then all patients from the double-blind phase transition into an open-label extension. And what is there of huge interest is that we have a 6-month follow-up. So this is a long-term follow-up of patients for safety, but also efficacy, and we allow for retreatments of patients. What is important for our trial is that we allow patients to be retreated to make sure that they achieve remission or remain in remission throughout this period. So that is something that differs from other trials, and the whole idea is that you need to keep patients in remission.
Mhm. I see. And something that I thought was very important to note about this study was the amount of people with prior experience with psychedelics. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's important when recruiting for these trials?
Yeah, so this came out really vividly after the Lycosatcom. I know you've had a separate interview on that topic, and you've commented a few times about it. So the Lycos trials had a significant percentage of patients in the trial that had prior experience with psychedelics. And at that time, the FDA came up with this recommendation that future trials with psychedelics should be run in psychedelic naive patients. This would make it easier to avoid this anticipation bias where patients who haven't taken any psychedelics, they wouldn't know what it is. And so it would be preferable. So in our trial, we had only few patients that had a prior psychedelic experience in a lifetime, which really is aligned to the requirements by the regulators for the future.
I see, I see. And you know, I guess moving on to a different topic here, when I look at GH Research, I think the company does things quite differently from a lot of other groups in the psychedelic drug development space. Firstly by going with 5-MeO-DMT, looking at an inhalation approach, and also the individualized dosing regimen, which has been of particular interest to me for quite some time. So yeah, can you share the company's thought process behind the approach that you take?
Yeah, so first start with the inhalation, right? Why inhaled? Because the inhaled is the fastest route, right? And the lungs have the largest surface in our body, right? So when patients inhale GH001, it has an ultra rapid onset. So they go into a psychoactive phase very quickly, within seconds. And then the actual psychoactive phase lasts very short, on average 15 minutes, or we say up to 30 minutes. And this is important because you first you want this to be short. As you can see, it's short, but it's very efficacious from our data. Secondly, it makes it scalable one day in the interventional psychiatry clinic, and it's a lot more rapid than other treatments in development. And then we also, besides the ultra rapid onset of action, we have an ultra rapid antidepressive effect. as you see, we improve the symptoms even at 2 hours, which means that patients could go into the interventional psychiatry clinic, have a visit which could last between 1 to 3 hours, depending on how many doses they need, and then then go home, and many of them could be feeling much better already on the same day. So that's why the e-health is also, there's a lot of the interventional psychiatry clinics deliver IV ketamine, and IV ketamine in the States is really used approach for many psychiatry conditions and neurological, but surely patients would prefer a lot more an e-health approach rather than an IV formulation. And then when we talk about the individualized dosing regimen, right? That was your next question. That is also unique to us. So why have we decided to go with this individualized dosing regimen? There's 2 parts to it. How does it work first? So the patient, he has the first dose, and then we look at the intensity of the psychoactive experience, which is very simple. How we assess it, but in essence, you look at the intensity of this psychoactive experience and how much patients lost control, and how safe was this first dose. And if the first dose was well tolerated and the patient did not experience this intense psychoactive experience, you then go to the second dose, and the same repeats with the third dose. And why this approach? First, we show really good safety. As you see, the GH001 is well tolerated. Majority of the adverse events are mild to moderate. And then secondly, in the preliminary data, we see this correlation that when patients experience this intense psychoactive effect, the efficacy gets better. So it's like a breakthrough experience, which leads to better efficacy. So we give the opportunity for the patient to reach that maximum psychoactive experience, but that would help them quicker get into remission. It's also safer because every time you go to a higher dose, you look at how the patient tolerated the previous dose. So it's both safety and efficacy. And, because we have such an ultra rapid onset with a very short duration of the psychoactive phase, it still allows you to do all this within 1 to 3 hours, depending on how many doses the patients need.
I've always been interested in the individualized dosing regimen that you guys use. I guess firstly, because at least from my perspective, it seems like you're trying to maximize the likelihood of someone achieving these peak psychoactive effects, intense psychoactive effects.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to hear more from you on, do you think it's also a benefit maybe that someone doesn't have to take a higher dose than what is necessary for them to have this type of experience?
Yeah, well, in essence as well, that, and we as doctors are trained always primum non nocere, right? Do the best for the patient and always start with the lower dose and dose escalate. And also the regulators, they like an approach where you've taken the safest possible approach for a patient, where they go with a low dose and then go to the next dose and next dose. So indeed, I agree with you. This way patients take whatever they need in order to reach this psychoactive intense experience and get the benefit of the treatment.
Okay, I see. And when looking at the data as well that's been released so far, it seems this type of treatment will be way less frequent than what we see with Spravato. A lot of visits to the clinic. So with that being said, I'm curious to know what was the retreatment criteria in the phase 2b, and how is that developed?
Yeah, so and I'll talk to you about as well the frequency of retreatment and how it compares to Spravato. The retreatment criteria was developed with clinicians, with experts in the field of depression or key opinion leaders, and the goal of the retreatment criteria in our trial was to mirror real life clinical practice in the future, and to make sure that the patient is reaching remission. So I don't want to go into the complex schematic of how we retreated patients, but in essence, it was based on the depressive symptoms. So if the patient, based on the previous treatment, wasn't getting enough antidepressant effect, they would get a retreatment, and that was based on stringent criteria. So I'm just illustrating here. Or if the patients got better, but let's say a few months later their depressive symptoms are starting to go up, they can get a retreatment to bring them back into depression. That's the goal. So to bring them back in remission, sorry. So that's the goal. Either achieve remission and keep the patient then in remission. And I think that's what you would want to see in clinical practice one day, right? Have the opportunity for a patient to be retreated when they need it. And TRD is a chronic disease. You talk to any clinician or experts in that field, they will tell you that patients in treatment-resistant depression, they would need retreatments. And finding a treatment that would work every time they go, which is what we see with GH001 to the clinic, is very beneficial, because they know that they will go again in whatever period, and they would get the retreatment and it would work for them again. And then on the topic of comparing to Spravato, indeed, I mean, that is more, there's two sides to it. A lot of the investors have been asking about this topic, but also a lot of the interventional psychiatry clinics. We are always benchmarked to Spravato now because that's the standard of care. A lot of patients with TRD get Spravato. Spravato has a very complicated induction period where, patients need to go quite often. And that leads to, requirements in the interventional psychiatry clinic, how they manage these patients and bring them recurrently until they're feeling better. While with us, it becomes a lot more simple because then you would have very infrequent retreatments and you could treat a lot more patients in the clinic. That's the whole benefit.
Yeah, it's very important to note. And staying on the topic of retreatment, when I tuned in to the an analyst call on when the results were released,
Yes.
the thing that really stood out to me was that GH001 consistently showed antidepressant efficacy with each new dose. Can you speak about the importance of this?
Yeah, so I guess, first, the current oral antidepressants not only take 6 weeks for them to work, and they work in only 12-13% of the TRD patients, but with time, the effect could wear off, and it's important to know that there's treatment where it works every time the patient needs it. Now, we allowed up to 5 retreatments during the 6 months, and obviously every next treatment period there'll be less patients needing it, but every time a patient needs it, the drug works. And that actually colleagues and psychiatrists, clinicians thought was one of the most important benefits of GH001 because it brings certainty for the clinician that if the patient requires retreatment, it would work. It would also bring this certainty for insurers because insurers also can challenge, they can provide reimbursement or payment for certain periods, and it would be based on whether the drug would work or not. So knowing that you have treatment that works every time a patient needs it would also be good for the insurance.
I see. And, so GH Research had a much different trial design, I guess, when compared to other phase 2 trials from other companies in the psychedelic drug development space. And it also seems that GH Research at the current moment has a better understanding of what a dosing schedule might look like in the future if GH001 is ultimately approved. I'm curious if this has any advantages when moving into your phase 3 program.
Yeah, the biggest and most important goal when you develop a new treatment is to always replicate data. So, from healthy volunteers, you move into phase 1, patients, then phase 2 patients, and then pivotal program. And having this positive trial in phase 2, knowing how to run it, and getting the treatment paradigm for the pivotal program is really helpful, because then we know how to run our pivotal program and how to successfully complete it with positive data, which would allow us to get the drug approved. And I think in our case, because it's innovation, it's new type of treatment, we also need to gather as much data as possible to provide it one day in the label for the physicians that would be using GH001 for patients and wouldn't have been part in our trials, but they would want to read and know how to use it. And obviously we would educate them and we would have all the programs needed. But yeah, I think the trial, because it was in such large number of patients, and for it's in for a long duration, 6 months, and we've allowed these retreatments, provides us with a lot of data that would help us for the pivotal program.
I see. And if you don't mind me asking, so some of these other companies, it's 1 or 2 doses followed out to like 3 months, let's say. So what was the thought process of having the primary endpoint at day 8 and then going into the open label extension after day 8?
So why the primary endpoint at day 8? This is the FDA guidance for developing ultra rapid antidepressants. Their guidance is that you choose an early endpoint, and if they advise you could choose even earlier endpoint if you want. And then the second part was also decided and advised and designed with KOLs, experts in the field, who also advised that because we are so ultra rapid acting, we should choose a rapid acting primary endpoint. It was also seen as quite ethical by the regulators and the clinicians that we had a short double blind where patients then would get active when they go into the open label extension. The patients in the trial are washed out from any treatment. So, they are not on treatment while in the double blind phase. So yeah, that was the choice of the primary endpoint. And I think it's very important to remember that for ultra rapid antidepressants, these early endpoints are very important, because there's a difference of bringing a patient in remission very early within the treatment, or waiting for weeks or months for them to see some improvement. In the future, we would look at also later endpoints in a double-blind phase. We are very clear on the requirements by the FDA and what they want in the pivotal program. So that would also happen.
I see. And that perfectly brings me to my next topic of a potential phase 3 program. So, it seems to me, based on what I've read, that the FDA is asking for 1 out of the 2 phase 3 trials to have a placebo/low dose group, a medium dose group, and a high dose group. If you're allowed to share at the current time, how might this work with the individualized dosing regimen?
Yeah, so, first there's the placebo control, or whether you use a low dose, right, in the trial. You see that the recent companies who started their phase 3 program, they've got 2 placebo-controlled trials. So the one thing we know from the FDA is that they are very supportive and open to running placebo-controlled trials, because that provides the best data on safety, and safety is critical for one day being in the market and how the drug is going to be administered to patients. So with regards to placebo control, I think the FDA are definitely open and supportive of running placebo-controlled pivotal trials. With regards to a low dose, we can use low dose in our trials. We don't have an issue with that, and we can always have an arm with a low dose that wouldn't interfere with the IDR. It can be done, and it's something we would meet the FDA. We have an end of phase 2 meeting where we talk to the FDA about the pivotal program and align on the design that they would want to have.
Okay, thank you very much for the response. And I guess, the final question I have for you is, can you speak about the path forward for GH001?
Yeah, the path forward. So, we are a biotech in Ireland, as I told you. So now we have raised funding to move forward with the pivotal program. We are still completing the open label extension. It's imminent to complete in Q1. We are working actively on communicating all of the data that we've generated from the phase 2b trial, and we will generate in the open label. We are also actively communicating now on the other data that you mentioned from postpartum depression, proof of concept, and then bipolar disorder 2 depression studies. These two studies also have generated really good data. So there's a lot on communication ongoing and scientific meetings, etc. And then at the same time, we're working on working on the design of our pivotal program, and the next stages would be to discuss the pivotal program with the FDA and move towards a global program. We haven't disclosed any timelines, but definitely, the goal of our company would be to develop this new treatment and make sure that we make it available to patients one day.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to following the progress. Again, yeah, seeing the data that has been released so far from your company has been, it's been really impressive to look at. And Vili, thank you so much for coming on the channel. And yeah, again, really looking forward to following the continued progress from GH Research.
Yes, we stay in touch, Jake. Thanks very much. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you.